Dog for engagement. Okay, I want to pitch movie idea I had, which is how do we bring young people to like the classic monsters again? For those who aren't in the loop, the classic Universal monsters are like, like Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Bride, Creature. Those are like some of the best horror movies ever made. But young people, other than weirdos like moi, don't really get into them. So how do we get them into them? Universal specifically has two ways of doing it, and neither of them aren't really effective. The first, come on. Oh, sorry. I'm walking a dog and she's distracted by a squirrel. Say hi, Belle. You already saw her. Universal, the studio that owns the classic monsters, have primarily done two ways of getting young people into them. One is by using the name and nothing else, which isn't necessarily the dog. Territorial battles. So, territorial battles are important. But as I was saying, Universal has two ways of trying to get young people into the Universal monsters, and neither are super effective. Both have elements of good ideas in them. Actually, I guess no, there are three now, but I think about it. They have a kind of one and the same. Yeah, there are two. But the first way is use the name and not much else. The first thing that comes to mind is the Epic Universe movie, or Epic Universe rides at Universal Studios, which have elements of good ideas, but of like make a theme park themed around the Universal monsters and like slightly update them a bit. That could get young people involved, yes. The problem is, young people who go to theme parks aren't the most invested in Universal monsters already, which is part of why they have the theme park. But because they aren't invested in the Universal monsters, they aren't able to make the rides like the Universal monsters. The YouTube channel Monster Kid Corey has done plenty of videos about this, where he talks about how rides based on the Universal monsters should be slow-moving dark rides with animatronics of like Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, both Lon Chaney's and Claude Rains and Colin Clive. But you have to remember, young people are idiots. So, who have no attention span. So something slow moving and dramatic and interesting won't immediately get them invested. But so they have to like speed it up a bit, and they don't use the Universal monsters at all. The other example I can think of using the name and nothing else, which I think is a bit more effective, is they try to remake them as psychological thrillers. Like they did a remake of the Wolfman, which was kind of closer to the original idea for the 1941 version, where you don't actually see the werewolf, and like you have to figure out whether or not it's all in his head, which wasn't great. But that kind of bombed. So like, yeah. And the one before that, The Invisible Man, which did better and was also and what I actually do think is a good movie that holds up. But it changes it so it's a man in an invisible costume, which in like a metaphor for an abusive relationship. And I think those are both good movies, but they won't make for a good franchise. But they are better at getting people invested because they're closer in tone to the originals. They're slower moving. They're more about the people's relationship with the monsters than the monsters themselves. But that's not the only. But they still aren't like the best way. The other way, there's another way Universal has been doing, which I do think is a lot better. They've been trying to turn the Universal monsters into superheroes, which isn't a bad idea, but like, it's just that they don't understand how. Like, they tried the Dark Universe, the greatest franchise of all time, with this one whole movie, and didn't turn out well. And they also did Dracula, and is it Untold or Retold? The Dracula movie where he kind of looks like Jared Leto. Maybe it was Jared Leto. I haven't seen it, but those two don't work. The Dark Universe and that Dracula something told didn't work for what specific reason. They tried to make the Universal monsters comic booky, but in the wrong direction. What they tried to do was make them superheroes, but what works much better is make them super villains. The movie Van Helsing kind of did that, but it was also Van Helsing, so nobody talks about it, deservedly. That movie's dog shit. But I think a much better take on this is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where because that's like a universal type monsters, vampires, Frankensteinian monsters. I call them flesh columns, but Frankensteinian monsters and like werewolves, and it's like, but it's told in a comic booky way. Like, I could see Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a like 80s alternative comic, like sitting on a shelf next to Vampirella. In fact, it was turned into a comic book. And that's what I want to talk about. How to make the Universal monsters more comic booky. So here's a very hypothetical idea that's probably never gonna work because of copyright, but it'd be a duology trilogy. I only have one planned out, I only have two planned out, and one I'm still working on the details on, but I might tell you anyways. But be called Monster Mash Royale, and the plot would be a three-way battle between Dracula, Dr. Frankenstein, and Van Helsing, more Wolfman, and Van Helsing is like I'll explain it. The basic plot would be Dracula wants to take over the world with more magical monsters. So think like he'd be teaming up with I'm trying to obviously he'd have Renfield, but like he'd have like King Kong and like the ghost from the haunting, or and that sort of stuff, you know, more of a mystical side. Then, and on the other hand, you'd have Frankenstein, who'd have more scientific monsters, like obviously the Frankenstein monster with Dr. Frankenstein and Igor, but also like the creature from the Black Lagoon and Paula the Ape Woman. Probably not. Nobody but me gives a shit about Paula the Ape Woman, but justice for Paula. And he'd be trying to take over the world with science. Yeah, and I don't have the teams fully memorized. I have them planned out, but I didn't memorize them because I do these off the cuff just so I can get something out, because that's better than nothing. And but Paula the Ape, but the one thing I do remember is each side would have a giant monster that's like that's from at least the first half of the 50s, or at the latest. I tried to keep this all classic Universal, but I couldn't resist putting a King Kong in there, and I thought it'd be unfair if Dracula had a kaiju and the other side didn't. And the other sides, my bad, but the Frankenstein would have Godzilla for their giant monster, but then there'd be and those be two enemy factions fighting, and what we'd follow is Larry Talbot the Wolfman and Van Helsing, who would have the team, like that's the side of the humans. So it'd be like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and give me a second to think of the name. Phantom of the Opera. How did I forget that? Yeah, doesn't matter. But it's be that. So, but oh, and I remembered one of the guys on Dracula's team. The movie was cut between these three teams as they like race to stop each other. So like the first part of the movie be for like each of them recruiting people, you know, like Dracula would find a mummy's tomb, and like maybe the guy from White Zombie, but like that'd be weird with two Bela Lugosi's. Work in progress. Then Frankenstein would work with the Invisible Man, and then like go to Japan to like awaken Godzilla. And Unchained and not Lunch, and Wolfman and Van Helsing would like go to Paris and meet all the deformed guys there. And I'm gonna be honest, I haven't decided a giant monster for them. I'm leaning towards the Blob, and I don't know if maybe Reptilicus, but yeah, or go. Actually, I've just randomly made my decision. They'll have Gorgo. I don't care if it's from the 60s. It's close enough. If Evangelion can be included with the three greatest tokusatsu series, or satsu franchises, in the Shin universe. Gorgo can go in my, my classic Monsters Battle Royale movie. But then the second act would be like them traveling to different places to collect artifacts and weapons, So like the best way I can describe it is a road trip. Is if Indiana Jones, a road trip movie, and the first Avengers and like early in like the first Avengers movie and early Fantastic Four had like a weird kid. Oh, and did I already say the Universal Monsters? Obviously the Universal Monsters if I didn't say that. The final movie would be like a big monster brawl with like everybody fighting everybody, and it ends with Dracula impaled on a stake, the Frankenstein monster and put into like a mental institution, and the doctor in Dr. Frankenstein in prison. But however, I did not stop there. I came up with an idea for a sequel, plus possibly one, but I don't know. It'd be the Universal. Instead of the monsters of the 30s and 40s, mainly it would bring in more 50s and 60s monsters, because we had a hint of those with like Godzilla and Gorgo, who I just threw in after that. But this time they'd get things like what's their fucking the ants from them on Frankenstein's team, and like the body snatchers been on like the Wolfman Wolf Helsing thing that he'd get the what are they called? Tinglers. The Tingler, and like use there's a lot with, of course, more giant monsters like the who I hinted at earlier. And Dracula's main member be the I can't remember the damn name. But not the fly. That's Tarantula from the giant tarantula from Tarantula. The fly would be in the movie. He'd be on the human on Wolf Helsing, because he's like just a dude with who was in an accident. And like that be, and it have a slightly different structure. Instead of like a road trip Indiana Jones movie with Universal monsters and 50s monsters and like Silver Age monsters, this time it'd be more of like I can never remember shit. It'd be more of like, I'm sorry, I'm bad at names. Like a heist movie, not less of 11, more Baby Driver, but with like monster fights, hint of superheroes in them. And there's one more thing that I think be cool. I'd add one more team, which would be E.G. Tsuburaya, creator of Godzilla and Ultraman, who'd be dubbed the father of monsters, and he'd have some kaiju and henshin heroes, he'd have Ultraman and a Super Sentai Ranger and a bunch of kaiju and more tokusatsu stuff. So he'd be thrown into the mix. And here's my 0.5 idea for a possible third, which would be go from the 70s, 80s, and maybe 90s. I'm not as interested in that. But you get Ash on on Wolf Helsing, then Pinhead on Dracula, and Jason on Frankenstein, and that one just be I'm thinking the most recent Chainsaw Man movie, which I just saw last night, or not last night, Tuesday night. So yeah, but that's a situation of what that one will be like. If I think of more details tomorrow, I'll talk about it. Happy Halloween.